Vamos pa la playa, pa curarte el alma. Cierra la pantalla, abre la medalla.
How to lose weight on vacation? It is possible. I'm living proof. I just spent the last 2 weeks in Nicaragua from January 14th to January 28th. And to my horror, when I was prepping for this episode much earlier today, I had initiated a manual backup of my iPhone that took all the images and videos. And then after I did the backup, I initiated an update. I always do a backup before I do an update because an update actually killed my previous phone, my iPhone 11. Unbeknownst to me, the backup failed. And when I initiated the update, it crashed the new phone. So I lost every photo, every video from those 14 days. Typically, I'd only need a few highlight photos from a trip. It was no big deal. But now that I'm a podcaster and a quote unquote content creator, it was painful because I spent a lot of time on that vacation getting images of things because I wanted to share more information about Nicaragua. So there was going to be a lot of that information here. So apologies for its absence. I was able to recover a few photos and some videos that I had sent to people during the trip. So that really speaks to the power of networking. A few months ago, I read Never Eat Alone, which is the ultimate instructional manual for networking. And one of the big goals I have for 2025 to get much better at that. The podcast has been a great way to meet people, but I need to supercharge that. A network can serve a lot of purposes. It can be a safety net. In this case, it was a great safety net data backup because I had shared photos and videos. I was able to get some of it back, and I look forward to sharing that with you. At the end of December of 2024, I wanted to do a year-in review episode to talk about lessons that I had learned throughout the year, overview of some of the guests, the podcast, and projects. I pushed that out until today because we had some great guests in December that had time-sensitive events coming up. So we wanted to make sure their episodes aired to promote the things that they were doing. And so this does seem odd to do this at the end of January, but I'll try to make sense of it. One of the things that we're really looking forward to in 2025 is a slight change of format. I'd like to do more solo content like what I'm doing now. Historically speaking, on the channel, these solo podcasts have not done very well, but we did identify some of the reasons why, and we're working on those. Obviously, it's a lot less work for me technically when I have a guest because I'm asking questions. I don't have to sit here and make this really smooth delivery. There's a lot of pressure when you're speaking directly to the camera. I'm not working on a script. I wrote down some basic ideas to talk about, did a slight rehearsal, and hit the red light, which is another thing. I may seem very comfortable on camera, and I'm at the point now where it's not as bad as it was when I started last year. But yeah, it can still be scary because you're still putting out information that could be misconstrued, and we're all worried about judgment. But the big message for 2025 is just get started. So I don't want this video to be clickbait. I actually did lose weight on vacation. I lost 5 pounds, and I thought about it. By day 9, I started noticing some physiological changes. I've been struggling with acid reflux for the better part of 20 years and was taking medication for a long time. And then I just recently went to just an antacid at night, which usually is enough. By day 8, I stopped using the antacid, despite the fact that I was eating sometimes fried, sometimes spicy food, sweets, but I wasn't eating processed foods. I was eating very fresh. Some of these products were off the farm a couple of days before it ended up on my plate. So it was just amazing. This trip to Nicaragua, which was my third, I really noticed the quality of the food, even at cheaper restaurants. It's just hard to explain because everything here is so processed. And even the nicer restaurants here, you're getting mass-produced products by Cisco. 42% of the food that we consume in the United States comes from somewhere else. The top 5 countries are Canada, Guatemala, Chile, and Peru. Hopefully I named 5 there. Let me do that again. Guatemala, Canada, Chile, Peru, oh, and Mexico, of course. So that's where we get most of our food from. Those are the top 5. So it takes a journey before it gets here. And usually once it does get here, it gets processed and packaged. Now, down there in Nicaragua, it gets harvested fresh and distributed to these restaurants fresh. So it's really hard to put into words until you've had great food. And the other thing that I'm always on about when it comes to Nicaragua is the price of the food. As far as the weight loss, the food was really fresh. I was eating some ice cream and things like that and still lost weight, but I was on vacation. I was having a good time. I wasn't stress eating. I was walking a lot. I was out in the sun. And hey, it's winter here in the US, but down there it's their summer. So it was about 90 to 100 degrees every day. Plus, I'm outside. Now I got used to it after a while, but that does help with the weight loss. So it was a combination of very fresh foods, movement, and being outside. I mean, surprise, right? But I know people that have gone on cruises and come back in a week and they're 10 pounds heavier. You can have a very affordable vacation and have some really great fresh fruit in Nicaragua. You know, as anybody that's watched the channel for very long, they know that I'm a big fan of the country. I had more photos and videos to share with you of the trip. But if you're connected with me on social media, you'll see some of those reels. Particularly the best outlet would be Facebook. So connect with me on there. I've got the Free Time Mastermind business page on there and also my personal page. The second most active is probably LinkedIn. And I have a link tree. Maybe I'll just drop the link tree in there because we've expanded to almost every social media outlet. As far as the year-end review is concerned, as mentioned elsewhere, I switched from an entrepreneur. I had an art gallery. I was a marketing consultant, and I was also employed at a company in a marketing capacity. But I had a lot of different things happening at one time, and I was very much in the entrepreneurial space. I was doing a lot of networking at the time. I got an opportunity to make a lot more money just working in another industry. And ultimately, I did that. I took the bag, so to speak. And as a popular quote goes, a salary is a drug they give you when they want you to forget about your dreams. So I went to sleep from about 2011 until the very end of 2023. I had been having this series of business conversations with a very close personal friend of mine, and something just woke up in my mind. I had also seen over the last couple of years, we were calling it automation at the time, but I could see changes were happening in the industry that I was working in. And although I'm very grateful for the lifestyle changes that that industry has helped me, and of course, people know I'm an insurance adjuster. I've said that there's no secret there, but it's been very good to me. I've been good about saving and being careful and trying to do the right things with it. But at the end of 2023, that's when I started thinking of these ideas of different things I wanted to do. February of 2024 is when I decided to start the mastermind group. I had already been doing something informally like that, where me and other entrepreneurs and business people were just talking. And we started to do it more, and we were trying to bring other people in, like-minded people or people with some similar goals. That became a formalized venture by March of 2024. Along with that was a marketing campaign, which that marketing campaign could be its own video. So I'll save that. But on March 27th of 2024 is when this podcast was launched, which was a companion to the mastermind group itself. And a mastermind group in this capacity would be entrepreneurs. Our first guest was on the podcast was photographer Darren Maslach. He knew me back when I was involved in the gallery business, and that's where we met. And we talk a little bit about that. It's an interesting story. So I got completely away from social media during that time, and just a note to people. I know right now there's a lot of discussion about people leaving platforms. Some people already have. I would caution against it. Networking is very difficult, and if you've built a network of associates on a particular social platform and you don't agree with the person who owns it or something, don't let that interfere with your business. I've actually got some notes about doing an entire other episode about how people's political opinions are really hurting their business and hurting their ability to affect positive change in the world. So deplatforming yourself, I don't think that's a good idea. If you've got 7 friends on whatever medium, it's probably not going to do much harm if you want to jump off. But if you've got some deep ties on there from a business perspective, I mean, even just friends, we all need people. This is coming from somebody who deleted their social media presence twice. I did it around 2012 when I decided I'd transitioned from the art entrepreneurial world into I'm the insurance guy now. So I kind of shut all of that down. Then in 2018, I think it was when I became a fraud investigator, the employer encouraged me to get off social media because we were doing a lot of court cases and everything was discoverable. Anything could be brought into court if it was relevant to a case. So we did background searches on other people. They did background searches on us. So I kind of burned it. That I completely deleted stuff then. I just burned it to the ground. Big mistake. I should have just paused it or froze it, but it's so hard to restart those social networks. I had thousands of friends. So these were people that I actually knew on a first name basis, at least half of the people out of what I guess at my peak, maybe 3,500 friends. How much easier things would be, like this podcast, for example, if I had that network. And even though Facebook's not what it was, it's still gigantic. So with Darren coming in as the first guest, that was interesting choice to have him, and I'm grateful that he came on because it's very difficult to ask people when you don't even have a podcast, and he made a leap of faith with us, and we really appreciate that. Despite the unpolished appearance of that first episode, it's still considered to be one of the most popular. And I think that's fantastic because I think I had a bed sheet on the wall behind me and a headset. And it was pretty funny when I go back and look at it. The audio wasn't bad, I have to say. And Darren did a fantastic job. He's extremely funny. And once we had that first guest, it was a little easier to start asking. The trouble is just the beginning. Since then, we've been very fortunate to sit down with some wonderful people with some great stories to tell. And around the 1 year anniversary of the podcast, which will be late March of 2025, we'd like to do an anniversary episode where we will share some behind the scenes. People have asked about the gear and microphone selections and these in-ear monitors, which I think are fantastic. And that brings us to our virtual assistant, Caroline. We met her on Upwork. And I had wonderful experiences with people on Upwork. And that's also where our video editor comes from. Initially, Caroline was only helping with the booking with the guests. She now does the thumbnails. She did a complete makeover of all the thumbnails. She did such a great job when she came in that we went back and just had her do all of them. So a lot of channels don't do that. I don't see where they go back and brush things up. It really made the channel appear a lot more professional. It was a little easier to get guests when they come in and see that we're taking it very seriously. So for you future podcasters out there, I mean, hey, if you just you can start a podcast with just a smartphone. You don't have to go gonzo like we did, but it was easier for us to get fantastic guests without a lot of cajoling, since we had a professional appearance. Let's say by episode 6, we were looking pretty decent. Again, thanks to Caroline. What started this whole journey for the podcast, and I know I'm jumping around a little bit, was in November of 2023. That's how important it is. I'll remember I read the book by Dan Martell, Buy Your Time Back. And he said, when you start a venture, you should start it with people working with you and helping you. I knew it was going to be tough going, but I made a conscious decision to have a VA and an editor. That way, in case it got really big, we could spin it up. There's been a few where I did the thumbnails. There's a few where I did the editing, but obviously the best ones are the ones where it's been done by somebody else. You can reach out to me if you look for Caroline Madriz, plus she's also on Facebook, and then Javon Winston, who is, if you just look him up on Upwork, if you need somebody, you can mention me and mention the Free Time Mastermind podcast. If you need an editor, he does great work. And Caroline, she does a bunch of things. She knows social media. She can do virtual assistant work. She's bilingual. She's in Nicaragua too, by the way. So another Nicaraguan connection. And just a word about virtual assistants in general, and it goes back to Dan Martell's book. There's times where I'm in two places because of Caroline. She could be talking with a potential future guest, and that's a phone call I don't have to make. When you have an assistant, it's not just the things you don't want to do. You have to focus on the things that if you're really good at it, you probably should be the one doing that activity. But if you're not good at something, you really should have somebody else do that. Sometimes the back and forth conversations via email to get a guest on gets a little tedious to me trying to line schedules up and so forth. So having her do that is very valuable because conflicting schedules and going back and forth about times and slots steals my joy. I'm glad she's on our team helping us. As far as this episode itself, I'm looking at the numbers here. This is officially the 43rd installment of our weekly episode. We've had a few episodes drop a day or two early. We've had a few episodes drop a day or two late. This one's going to be late, but we've never missed a week in 43 weeks. One episode was manually removed. I remember that because it was the first three chapters of the books. It was my initial narration. And it wasn't the official narration that ended up on the audiobook. We decided to take that down after the book went up for sale. First three chapters was like a teaser to get people interested in the book. And the book is Scintilla, the ultimate guide to generating business ideas, products, and services. I always have to read the title and look at it before I say it because there was a lot of back and forth about the title and the subtitle. I still don't have it memorized. That's embarrassing. But it was first published as a Kindle on July 11th, followed by the paperback on July 17th. And then the hardback came out on August the 4th, 2024. It was a busy year, and both the podcast as well as the book was created and published while I was working a 60-hour-a-week job at the time. It was brutal, but I got it done thanks to a lot of people, not the least of which Javon and Caroline. The book exclusively sold on Amazon. We decided early on that KDP, which is Kindle Direct Publishing, that's the publishing part of Amazon. It had so many tools and it was so much easier to get the book on there for self-publishing. That's the way we went with it. Formatting was a little different between the Kindle, the paperback, and the hardback, particularly the covers. That was the big struggle. I did do a video about the book. Since it was my first book, there was a big learning curve. I had assistants. I had somebody from Upwork that had done books before help me out, both with the cover and the formatting. Initially, I had planned to have the audiobook out by September, and I'm embarrassed to admit this, but the book that I had written, the paper version, I had never read aloud, which was a huge mistake. So when I started doing the first run-throughs of the audio narration, I could hear how clunky some of the sentences were and disjointed the paragraphs were. And when I heard it out loud for the first time, I realized the book needed serious changes. So thankfully, not too many of those paper copies were purchased. And I was able to do a pretty major revision. I think about 15% of the book is different. A lot of it had to do with sentence structure, the flow, and I even had an opportunity to put in some updates. Once I realized the book needed changes, I paused the audiobook project, revised the Kindle paperback and hardback versions. The material is much tighter, more cohesive. I felt proud that I had finished a book because that was months and months of work to get that done. And I was proud of it, but I really feel so much better about the material in the updated version. The way KDP and the Amazon's self-publishing works, I could update it every month if I wanted to. That would be tedious, but there's no harm in going in and updating it every year. And for those that don't know, the book is about how to come up with business ideas, product ideas, and service ideas. And through my last check, I have not found another book. There's books about that gives you business ideas, that tells you them. There are books about where ideas come from and how to come up with them. But I had not found a book explaining the process of coming up with business ideas, the mechanics of it, and exercises. It's whole businesses, products, and services. It's not a niche book, and I think that obviously hurt it in publication, but it's the book that I wanted to write, and I did, and I'm still glad that I did. So once it was revised, that caused the audiobook not to come out until December 17th. but it did make the narration version, the audiobook version, better. So the big takeaway there is if you're a writer, make sure you read your writing out loud. That's a fundamental. And I skipped it. I don't know why. Around the book's 1 year anniversary, I'll do a follow up on the book since there's already a video. This is the one I was referencing earlier on the YouTube channel. It looks like it's listed July 31st, 2024, a video called Publishing Your Book from Concept to Amazon's KDP, which tells some of the book's creative background. We get more into the audiobook side, including Amazon's company, Audible, and ACX, which stands for Audiobook Creation Exchange. That's defined as an Amazon-owned marketplace for writers and voiceover talent to meet for the creation of audiobooks. I did the narration myself, but if you write a book and you want it narrated by someone else, ACX can help with that. So that was 2024. But what lies ahead? A few weeks ago, we started writing book reviews. You'll start seeing more posts about that on our social media. But as far as this podcast, my solo content, like this video, for instance, they don't do nearly as well. But we have identified some of the key weaknesses of the content. Going forward, we'd like to do a mix of 2 interviews a month and 2 solo episodes. And it has the potential to give you more variety. So we're considering a move to that combination. We're also in the early stages of an online business involving Nicaragua, since we see such a bright future there. We discussed that in our interview, the podcast interview episode with Todd Devon, real estate agent. So we'd like to delve into that a little bit more. We discussed some of the opportunities in Nicaragua on the podcast episode. Before Scintilla was finished, I had been thinking about writing other books. I had a list of different topics and some basic sketches of ideas for book topics. But after those 2 weeks in Nicaragua, I came back with a lot of written material. I was writing down ideas. I was making observations. Nicaragua was a unique place, and it's beautiful and underappreciated. And I was trying to figure out why. I was thinking through, why aren't there more Americans here? And only a couple of plane loads of tourists land in that whole country every day. They are experiencing a mini boom right now, but nothing like what should be there, considering all the fantastic things there are to see. That could be a book. And I came back with enough written material. I would need to coordinate with some people that have more experience with Nicaragua than I do. Obviously, I've interviewed people on the channel, but my 3 trips alone don't qualify me as an expert. However, I have good notes from all 3 trips. I tend to think very deeply about experiences that I'm going through, and I'm good at documenting that. So we'll see. That's up to the public to decide if it's an interesting subject. But I enjoy Nicaragua, and I think it would be a pleasure to write about the country. There's 2 groups of people that I see most frequently go down to Nicaragua. There's a younger crowd, 25 to 35. They're the surfers. Sometimes they're just doing the tourist thing. Sometimes social media creators, influencers. I also see digital nomads of that age group. And then you have the retirees and the expats, which tend to be above their 50s. So currently thinking about material that might appeal to both groups. But I do want to have whatever I write next. And right now, the Nicaragua book is top of mind. But the lesson that I learned from Scintilla is I do need to narrow my niche. So you don't want the book that's great for everybody, because it's hard to sell, hard to promote it, and hard to market it. I want to narrow down the demographic for who the book is for. And even if it doesn't sell, that's okay. It's a topic that I enjoy. For anybody out there creating content, even this channel, we've tried to have a niche. It's always been business and entrepreneurship, but we've leaned into digital nomads and expats. Depending on how many episodes you've seen, you'll see us leaning pretty heavily in that direction. And that's not likely to change. I'd really like to niche down a little bit more. I haven't found that perfect path forward, but I'm still enjoying the podcast. People are still tuning in and enjoying it, and the subscriber base is growing. Thank you so much for that. Just a quick final note on Nicaragua. I'm a bargain hunter, and the what you get for what you pay for down there is an immense return on investment as far as you're investing your vacation dollars. I don't know anywhere in the Western Hemisphere where you can get more bang for your buck. If you're super wealthy and money is not an issue for you, Nicaragua may not be the place for you, although they do have some exclusive you can enjoy. Plus, you can get there in under 3 hours from the Houston airport or the Miami airport. So that's a big plus too. You're not flying. I know some people when they go to Asia, what's that, 17, 18 hour, 21-hour flights, long layovers. And this is just 3 hours away. And your dollar goes further than you could imagine. I talk about Dan Martell's Buy Your Time Back quite a bit. And I mentioned that I had read it in 2023, which was part of this awakening business wise that led to all of this activity in 2024, the mastermind group, the podcast, the book. There was also a collective learning from having all these guests, more than 3 dozen conversations with fellow entrepreneurs. One person was in the science and technology field, but they were a YouTuber about the nature of consciousness. I really enjoyed that episode. And despite a wide variety of guests, there were some commonalities among them. Obviously, there are some pre-recording discussions and sometimes some post-recording discussions between me and the guests. And I've talked to a few of the past guests on a weekly basis. Some of the off-camera discussions where a lot of the ones in business are wanting more customers, they're wanting more prospects, they're wanting to grow their networks. I mean, that's one of the reasons why they come on a podcast, right? Is the exposure. But they're just like you and I. They are wrestling with self-confidence. There's some self-doubt there. Should I do this? Should I continue? Should I expand? Should I sell and get out? Should I go get a real job? People have all of these crazy things that they think and they tell themselves, and that's universal. I can't say every guest, but a vast majority of the guests were struggling with the same things that we all are. If you have expressed those openly during the podcast, we tend to see those episodes do better when the guest really opens up and we can identify with that struggle. One of the things I wanted to do with the channel is help people. The ideal audience to me is somebody who's a step or two behind where you are and they're trying to get where you are. So we're always trying to speak to that person and trying to get them to initiate, launch, move, and take that step forward. When the podcast started, I was hoping to turn the hosting over to someone else. Being the guy on camera was never my idea. I was painfully shy until about 35. I mean, I was pretty maybe funny and outgoing to my social circle. They knew me to be pretty outspoken, but to speak in front of people, especially to be on camera and for it to go out to everyone, yeah, that's pretty scary. After a couple of episodes, I wasn't able to get another host. I've talked to other people about coming on. I've talked about having a co-host, and then I could slowly work my way out of this role. I've done it long enough now that it's more comfortable. But even being a published author was never an aspiration of mine. I'm glad I did it, but you see that the podcast and the book were at the concept phase was a means to an end, primarily to support the mastermind group. When you have a group of people, you need content, you need an outlet. I was building this infrastructure around this group, and then the podcast became the center of the focus. So that's what's great about starting things is you need to start, and you're not going to know what that end thing is until you get started, because there'll be this, you can plan as much as you want, but once you actually get your feet in the water, things will twist and turn in strange ways. When I had a recording studio in the late 1990s, I would tell people that they just wanted to be a rock star. And I'd say, yeah, that's great. Pursue that dream, but you're really good at writing these short songs. So you should think about doing commercial jingles, which was that paid very good money at that time. So you never know the thing that you're trying to shoot for. That's great. Keep going for it. But just be ready to take those little divergent paths. So when the podcast started to grow faster than the group itself, I leaned into that because wherever it's working, put that energy. And the podcast could evolve into something else. It could be all group discussions. It could be all just me on camera, solo content. We could go completely to shorts. None of this did I know anything initially. As a matter of fact, the channel didn't even produce shorts until halfway through. Engagement, as far as likes and comments and things on shorts, very low. We get most of the comments and the likes on longer form content, but people do like those shorts, and it makes content for posts on social media. And although I continue to hone my podcasting and my writing skills, they have gotten easier. That's my message to you. Between you and what you want are obstacles. And the biggest obstacle is usually fear. Just the fear to do it, to get started. What are people going to think? What's the neighbor going to say? I was the same way when I started this. Forward motion is the greatest antidote to fear, is just getting started. All our guests did one thing different. They felt the fear and they took a step forward anyway. Even coming on a podcast, I mean, it's crazy enough being the host, but being a first time guest, which we've had a few first time guests, I mean, that's scary for them too. So sometimes both of us are freaked out. You'd never know it because we've been blessed with how the interviews have turned out. But my question for you is, what will you do in 2025? Write it down. Take that step forward. If you can help a few people on the way, that's even better. From myself, on behalf of our virtual assistant, Caroline, and our video editor, Javon, we thank you for sticking with us all these months. We really appreciate you, especially you subscribers. We really appreciate that. Thank you to the guests who have shared their stories, and hopefully soon we'll hear yours. Until then.